President Ji-hoon of the newly formed Terran Federation was reviewing the morning reports when his communications officer announced an incoming transmission marked with the highest priority codes. The message was from the Galactic Assembly itself, and the sender was listed as the Emergency Council. The holographic display showed Assembly President Kethmera looking older and more desperate than Ji-hoon had ever seen the alien leader. Behind Kethmera, the Great Assembly Hall was only half full, as many species had either withdrawn from active participation or were too busy dealing with internal crises to attend sessions. President Ji-hoon, the Assembly leader, began without the usual diplomatic pleasantries. The Galactic Assembly formally requests the immediate return of humanity to full membership. We are prepared to reverse all previous decisions regarding human status. Earth will be granted a permanent seat on the Security Council. Human colonies will receive full voting rights. Your species will be given equal representation in all assembly committees. The desperation in Kethmera voice was obvious even through the translation system. The assembly was collapsing, and everyone knew it. Without human industry, trade routes had broken down. Without human innovation, technological progress had stalled. Without human diplomacy, old conflicts were reigniting across the galaxy. We offer complete amnesty for your withdrawal, the Assembly President continued. All treaties and agreements will be restored to their previous status. We will provide massive economic assistance to help integrate your new alliance partners into the Assembly system. Please respond as soon as possible. Ji-hoon studied the message for several minutes before composing his reply. The human president was a former diplomat who had spent years working within the assembly system before humanity withdrawal. He understood the political pressures that were driving this desperate offer. When he activated the transmission to send his response, Ji-hoon spoke calmly and without anger. "We appreciate the assembly's generous offer," he said. "However, humanity has found a different path forward. We do not seek to rule anyone, we never did. We simply wanted to be partners, friends, family with our galactic neighbors." The response continued, with words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. "When you rejected that relationship, you forced us to find our own way among the stars. What we have built in the past year is not a replacement for the assembly, it is something entirely different. It is a community based on mutual respect, rather than hierarchy, on cooperation rather than competition, on friendship rather than fear." The Terran Federation now included 47 different species, all bound together, not by law or treaties, but by shared values and common dreams. They were exploring regions of space the Assembly had never dared to enter. They were solving problems the Assembly had declared impossible. They were building a civilization that celebrated diversity while maintaining unity. The transformation was visible everywhere in Federation space. On the world of New Harmony, human children played alongside young beings from a dozen different species, learning to see differences as natural and beautiful rather than strange or threatening. The games they invented required cooperation between species with different physical abilities, creating new forms of recreation that brought everyone together. The educational system had evolved beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. Students learned not just facts and skills, but how to understand and work with beings who thought in completely different ways. A human student might learn mathematics from a Lithian teacher who understood numerical relationships as crystalline structures, while studying biology from a Verdani instructor who experienced life as interconnected energy flows. The scientific achievements were equally remarkable. Dr. Youngmi led a research team that had discovered 17 new habitable worlds in just 6 months. The secret was combining human curiosity with alien analytical methods, creating exploration techniques that were both thorough and efficient. The worlds they found were not just suitable for human habitation. They were designed to support multiple species simultaneously, using terraforming technology that blended human engineering with alien environmental knowledge. The Federation was creating garden worlds that could be home to anyone. The artistic renaissance was perhaps the most impressive development. Composer Taeyeon had created symphony works that could be appreciated by beings with completely different sensory systems. Her music used mathematical relationships that Lithians could feel as crystal harmonics, while incorporating emotional themes that touched human hearts and energy patterns that resonated with Corvani light consciousness. The galleries and museums of Federation worlds displayed works that challenged every assumption about what art could be. Sculptures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Paintings that changed based on the viewer's species-specific perception. Literature that told stories from perspectives no single species could have imagined alone. But the real proof of the Federation's success came when crisis struck the galaxy. The destroyer fleet appeared at the edge of known space like a nightmare made real. These were not explorers or traders, but beings whose only purpose seemed to be the complete elimination of all other life. The Assembly military forces were overwhelmed within days. Ships that had patrolled the galaxy for centuries were destroyed, so quickly that many never had time to send distress signals. Worlds that had been safe for millennia were reduced to lifeless rocks in a matter of hours. The Assembly sent one final, desperate message to the Terran Federation. There were no demands for political concessions, no attempts to negotiate terms, just a simple plea that cut through centuries of political complexity. Help us. The human response was immediate and without conditions. Fleet Admiral Do Yoon received orders to deploy every available Federation ship to defend Assembly worlds. The response message was equally simple. Where do you need Usta Federation fleet? That jumped to hyperspace was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human dreadnoughts flew alongside Meridian energy ships and Lithian crystal vessels. Quantum fighters provided reconnaissance, while Verdani bioships served as mobile hospitals and supply bases. But more than the diversity of ships, it was the unity of purpose that made the fleet effective. Every crew member from every species understood that they were not just defending their own territory. They were protecting the principle that all life had value and deserved to exist. The battle against the destroyer fleet lasted 3 days and covered dozens of star systems. The Federation forces fought with a coordination that seemed impossible given the number of different species and ship types involved. Human tactical flexibility combined with alien technological capabilities created strategies that confused and overwhelmed the attackers. Captain Suban commanded a mixed squadron that included ships from 8 different species. When her human destroyer was disabled by destroyer weapons, the Meridian energy ship in her formation immediately moved to provide cover, while the Lithian crystal vessel used its advanced sensors to guide repair efforts. The cooperation was instinctive and seamless. No one had to give orders or coordinate responses because every crew member understood their role in protecting their squadron mates. The destroyer fleet had never faced opponents who fought as a unified organism, while maintaining individual initiative and creativity. The turning point came when Admiral Do Yoon realized that the destroyers fought with perfect coordination but no individual judgment. They were incredibly effective against conventional military tactics, but they could not adapt to the kind of improvised responses that Federation forces specialized in. The final battle took place in the Nexus system, where the destroyer mothership was trying to establish a permanent base. The Federation fleet arrived to find assembly ships making desperate last stands against overwhelming odds. Many of the alien vessels were heavily damaged and their crews were preparing for death. The Federation forces did not hesitate. They threw themselves into the battle with the same intensity they had shown when defending their own worlds. Human ships took positions alongside Velkari vessels that had once called them useful pets. Meridian energy ships provided cover for Corvani gas ships, whose crews had voted to demote humanity just a year earlier. The battle was brutal and costly, but the Federation forces refused to abandon their former opponents. When the destroyer mothership finally exploded in a flash of light that could be seen from neighboring star systems, the surviving assembly crews found themselves being rescued by the same beings they had rejected and insulted. The victory was complete, but Admiral Do Yoon did not claim territory or demand tribute from the worlds they had saved. Instead, the Federation offered aid to rebuild damaged infrastructure and extended invitations for any assembly worlds that wanted to join the new alliance. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Entire sectors of assembly space voted to join the Terran Federation rather than remain under the old system. The beings who had once feared human influence now sought it eagerly because they had seen what cooperation could accomplish. The Velkari, who had pushed hardest for human demotion, were among the first to request Federation membership. Their representative arrived at Federation headquarters with a formal apology and a desperate plea for acceptance. "We were wrong. Ambassador Velkoff said through the Ambassador Sung-ho was reviewing reports from the outer colonies when his secretary announced that a diplomatic delegation had arrived at Earth, requesting an urgent meeting. The secretary looked confused as she delivered the message because the delegation was not from the Assembly or any of the major galactic powers. "They say they are from the Meridian Empire, sir," she said. "They want to discuss joining something they call the human sphere." "I told them we do not have a human sphere, but they insist on meeting with you anyway." Sang-ho had heard rumors about smaller species referring to human-controlled space as the human sphere, but he had not taken the reports seriously. Humanity had withdrawn from galactic politics, not created a new government to replace the Assembly. Yet here were official representatives of a sovereign empire, asking to join something that did not officially exist. The Meridian delegation was led by Ambassador Veltar, a graceful being whose species communicated through patterns of light that played across their translucent skin. The patterns showed deep respect and hope as Veltar spoke through the translation device. "Ambassador Sang-ho, we come to request membership in the human sphere. We know this may seem unusual, but we have watched what you have built in the months since your withdrawal from the Assembly. We want to be part of something that values all beings as individuals rather than as representatives of their species." Sang-ho stared at the alien diplomat, trying to understand what was being asked of him. "You want to join us?" he said slowly. "But we are not even a government anymore," Veltar replied, and the light patterns on his skin grew brighter with excitement. "In the Assembly, we were nothing but a minor voice ignored and overlooked by the major powers. Our ideas were dismissed, our needs were forgotten, our contributions were minimized." The Meridian ambassador gestured toward a holographic display that showed images from human colonies. "But in the past months, we have watched how you treat the alien populations who chose to remain in your space. You do not just tolerate diversity, you celebrate it. You do not just protect the weak, you help them become strong." Sang-ho had to admit that the images were impressive. The mixed species communities in human space had achieved things that pure species colonies had never managed. Human intuition combined with alien perspectives was producing innovations in science, art, and philosophy that surprised everyone involved. "We have reviewed your educational systems," Veltar continued. "Human children learn alongside alien children as equals. They are taught to see differences as strengths rather than barriers. This is what we want for our own young people." The Meridian delegation had brought detailed proposals for integration, including offers to share their energy manipulation technology and their knowledge of stellar navigation. But more importantly, they brought something that humanity had not expected to find again: trust. Within days of the Meridian request, similar delegations began arriving from across the galaxy. The crystal-based Lithians wanted human help developing their artistic abilities. Their species had always been logical and practical, but they had watched human artists create works that touched emotions the Lithians had never experienced. The plant, like Verdani, sought human assistance in terraforming projects. Human engineers had demonstrated an ability to work with natural systems, rather than against them, creating environments that supported multiple species simultaneously. Most surprising of all, the insectoid hive clusters sent their first-ever ambassadors to human space. These beings had never trusted any mammalian species, but they had observed how humans treated individual members of group-minded species with respect and understanding. Admiral Young-soo found herself commanding a fleet more diverse than anything the Assembly had ever fielded. But unlike the Assembly forces, where different species were assigned to separate roles based on their assumed capabilities, the human fleet integrated everyone based on individual skills and interests. The Kethrin quantum specialist, Zixara, worked alongside human engineers to develop new, faster-than-light communication systems. The Meridian energy artists created navigation displays that were both functional and beautiful. The Lithian strategic thinkers provided analysis that helped human commanders understand alien psychology. But the secret of the Alliance success was not just diversity, it was the human approach to leadership. Human commanders did not see other species as alien. They saw them as different kinds of people with unique perspectives and abilities. Commander Unesio had learned this lesson during her years serving in mixed-species crews. When she was assigned to command a frigate with a crew that included beings from 8 different species, she did not try to treat them all the same. Instead, she learned what motivated each individual and helped them contribute their best efforts. The Corvani engineer, who had been dismissed as slow and methodical by assembly commanders, became her most valuable crew member, because humans understood that careful, thorough work was more important than speed. The young Zephyrian, who had been considered too emotional for military service, became an excellent communications officer, because humans valued empathy as a strength rather than a weakness. Dr. Hyanwu was leading a research team that would have been impossible under assembly rules. His group included scientists from 12 different species, working on projects that crossed traditional boundaries between physics, biology, and philosophy. The breakthrough came when they realized that consciousness itself might be a fundamental force, like gravity or electromagnetism. The idea emerged from combining human intuition about the nature of awareness with alien mathematical models that described reality in ways human minds could barely comprehend. The assembly tried to create unity by making everyone the same, Dr. Hyanwu explained to a gathering of scientists from across the new alliance. We create unity by making everyone feel valued for being different. When beings know they're unique, perspectives are needed. They contribute more than they ever thought possible. The alliance was growing faster than anyone had expected. Species that had been enemies for centuries found common ground when they worked alongside humans, who refused to take sides in ancient conflicts. The human ability to see past old grudges and focus on shared goals was creating new possibilities for cooperation. Captain Dalsu was commanding a joint patrol mission when they encountered a distress signal from a Valkyrie merchant vessel. The same species that had insulted humanity in the assembly was now calling for help from human forces. The merchant ship was being attacked by raiders, and their shields were failing. Dalsu could have ignored the call or demanded payment for assistance. Instead, he ordered his mixed-species crew to rescue the Valkyrie without asking questions about politics or past grievances. The rescue was successful, and the grateful merchant captain asked why humans would help beings who had treated them so poorly. "Because you needed help?" Dalsu replied simply. "That is what people do for each other. We can argue about politics later, but right now you are in danger, and we have the power to help you." This attitude was spreading throughout the alliance. Species that joined the human sphere found themselves adopting human values of cooperation and mutual support. The result was a space where beings felt safe to be themselves while working together toward common goals. The transformation was most visible in the younger generation. Children who grew up in the alliance learned to see species differences as natural variations rather than barriers to friendship. A human child might have best friends who were crystalline, Lithians, gaseous Corvani, and plant-like Verdani, without thinking this was unusual. These children were developing new forms of art that combined human creativity with alien perspectives. They were solving mathematical problems by using intuitive leaps that humans excelled at, combined with logical analysis that other species preferred. They were creating music that could be appreciated by beings with completely different sensory systems. The Alliance Council that formed to coordinate between species was unlike any government the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of rigid hierarchies based on species membership or economic power, the council was organized around the principle that every voice deserved to be heard. Representative Jae-hee had been elected to speak for the human colonies, but she found herself representing the interests of all Alliance members rather than just her own species. The Meridian representative did the same, and soon the council was working as a unified body rather than as a collection of competing interests. The Alliance military was proving equally effective. When pirates attacked Alliance territory, they found themselves facing coordinated responses from multiple species working together seamlessly. Human tactical thinking combined with alien technological capabilities created defensive systems that were nearly impossible to overcome. But perhaps the most important development was the Alliance approach to conflict resolution. Instead of settling disputes through power struggles or economic pressure, the Alliance used human mediation techniques that focused on understanding each side's needs and finding solutions that benefited everyone. The galaxy was watching these developments with fascination and growing concern. The Assembly had been the dominant force in the Darkstar pirates had been waiting for this moment for decades. Their fleet of stolen warships and converted cargo vessels had been held in check by the combined might of the Assembly military forces. But now, with humanity withdrawn from Galactic, Politics and the assembly forces, scattered and demoralized the pirates, saw their chance. Captain Bloodclaw was not his real name, but it was the only one his crew had known for 15 years. He commanded over 200 ships filled with criminals, outcasts, and beings who had nothing left to lose. His target was the human colony of New Busan, a wealthy world that would provide enough loot to fund his fleet for years. The intelligence reports said the colony was defended by only 12 human vessels. Bloodclaw laughed when he read that number. Even if every human ship was a military dreadnought, they would be outnumbered 20 to 1. It would be a massacre, and word would spread throughout the galaxy that human space was free hunting ground. For anyone bold enough to take it, Commander Wu Jin received the pirate fleet warning. While his patrol squadron was conducting training exercises near the edge of the New Busan system, his 12 ships included 2 destroyers, 4 frigates, and 6 corvettes. Against 200 pirate vessels, they should have been completely outmatched. But Wu Jin had fought in the border wars, where human forces had learned to win through superior tactics and coordination rather than overwhelming numbers. His crews had trained together for years, and they moved like dancers who could anticipate each other's steps. Steps. Signal all ships, he ordered his communications officer. Battle Formation Delta 7. We will meet them at the asteroid field, where the terrain gives us advantages. Lieutenant H.I. commanding the destroyer Soul's Pride understood immediately. The asteroid field would break up the pirate formation and prevent them from using their superior numbers effectively. Individual human ships would be able to engage smaller groups of pirates while using the asteroids for cover. The battle began when the pirate fleet dropped out of hyperspace, expecting to find helpless human colonists fleeing in terror. Instead, they found 12 warships waiting in perfect formation among the asteroids like predators. Ready to pounce. Commander Wu Jin had studied every available recording of pirate tactics. They relied on fear and chaos to paralyze their victims, while overwhelming them with sheer numbers. But these tactics had never been tested against opponents who refused to be intimidated. The human ships moved with precision that seemed impossible to the watching pirates. Each vessel knew exactly where its squadron mates were at all times. When one ship engaged a group of pirates, the others positioned themselves to provide support without getting in each other's way. Captain Minesio, commanding the frigate, Honor found herself surrounded by 8 pirate vessels. Under normal circumstances, this would have been a death sentence. But as the pirates closed in expecting an easy kill, her squadron mates arrived from 3 different directions. Simultaneously, the pirates had never faced coordination like this. They were used to fighting opponents who panicked under pressure, or who fought as individuals trying to save themselves. Human military doctrine was built around the idea that every crew member would sacrifice themselves to protect their comrades if necessary. Lieutenant Daejung was piloting a corvette when his engines were damaged by pirate fire. Instead of retreating to safety, he used his remaining momentum to ram his ship into the side of a pirate cruiser. His crew evacuated in escape pods just before impact, but the psychological effect on the other pirates was devastating. These humans were not just warriors, they were something far more dangerous. They were protectors who would rather die than let innocents suffer. Fighting such opponents was like trying to defeat people who had already accepted death as the price of victory. The battle raged for 6 hours among the spinning asteroids. Human ships darted between the giant rocks like birds, while pirate vessels struggled to maintain formation in the chaotic environment. The humans used every piece of debris as a weapon, firing torpedoes that would ricochet off asteroid surfaces to hit targets from unexpected angles. Captain H.A. found herself in the most desperate situation when her destroyer was cornered by the pirate mothership. The massive vessel was 10 times larger than Soul's Pride and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But as her weapons systems failed and her shields collapsed, H.A. made a decision that would become legendary. All crew to escape. Pods, she ordered. Prepare for emergency evacuation. Set collision course for the pirate mothership primary reactor. Her crew obeyed without question, even though they knew their captain was planning to sacrifice their ship to protect the colony. The escape pods launched just as Soul's Pride accelerated toward the pirate mothership on a collision course that would destroy both vessels. The pirates watched in horror as the human destroyer rammed into their flagship at full speed. The explosion could be seen from the surface of New Busan, like a new star appearing in the sky. Captain Bloodclaw and his command crew died instantly, along with over 3,000 pirates who had thought they were hunting helpless prey. The psychological effect rippled through the remaining pirate fleet like a shockwave. They had come expecting easy victory against opponents who would surrender rather than fight. Instead, they found warriors who treated death as just another tactical option to be used when necessary. The surviving pirates began to retreat, but Commander Woojin was not finished with them. His remaining ships pursued the fleeing raiders with relentless efficiency. Human frigates that had seemed small and helpless hours earlier now hunted pirate cruisers through the asteroid field like wolves chasing deer. When the battle finally ended, the pirate fleet had been completely destroyed. Over 200 ships had been reduced to drifting wreckage and escape pods. The survivors would carry word throughout the criminal underworld that human space was not safe hunting ground. Do not mess with humans, they would whisper in the taverns and meeting places where pirates gathered to plan their raids. These people are not just strong, they are completely insane. They will kill themselves just to make sure you die too. But the real impact of the battle was felt across the galaxy when the recordings reached the assembly worlds. The same military leaders who had dismissed human forces as useful but unremarkable now watched in amazement as 12 ships accomplished what their own fleets had failed to do for decades. Admiral Veltar of the Meridian Empire studied the battle. Recordings for hours trying to understand how such a small force had achieved such a decisive victory. The answer was not in the weapons or the ships themselves, but in the way humans fought together. They move like one organism, he reported to his superiors. Each ship knows instinctively what the others will do. They sacrifice individual advantage for group success in ways that our tactical computers cannot predict or counter. The Corvani, military analysts, reached similar conclusions. Human forces did not just cooperate, they seemed to share a collective consciousness during battle. Their willingness to die for each other made them nearly impossible to defeat, because destroying one ship only made the others fight harder. News of the victory spread throughout human space like wildfire. The colonists of New Busan held parades in honor of their defenders. Children drew pictures of the brave ships that had protected their homes. Artists composed songs about Captain HFY and her crew who had given their lives to save people they had never met. But perhaps the most important reaction came from the alien populations living in human space. The Kethran engineer Veltok, who had served on human ships for years, sent a message to his homeworld that was intercepted by assembly intelligence. "I have found my true family," he wrote. "These humans do not see me as an alien who happens to be useful. They see me as a person who deserves protection, even if it costs them their lives. I will never leave them because I know they will never abandon me." Similar messages were intercepted from dozens of other alien residents of human space, beings who had been expected to return to their homeworlds. When the novelty of living with humans wore off, were instead sending for their families to join them. The assembly military commanders, who had spent decades struggling with pirate attacks while achieving only limited success, now faced uncomfortable questions from their own governments. How had 12 human ships accomplished what their massive fleets could not? The answer was simple, but disturbing. Human military doctrine was not based on superior technology or overwhelming force. It was based on the idea that every person was worth protecting and that no sacrifice was too great to keep innocent beings safe. This philosophy made human forces incredibly effective, but it also made them impossible to control or predict. They would fight to the death for causes that other species considered hopeless. They would protect beings they barely knew as fiercely as they protected their own families. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity had not been weakened by their withdrawal from the assembly. They had been set free to remember what they were capable of when they fought for their own beliefs rather than for political compromises that satisfied no one. The pirate wars were just the beginning. Word was spreading throughout the galaxy that human space was protected by warriors who could not be intimidated, bought, or defeated through conventional means. The implicat President Sujin of the Galactic Assembly had not slept in 3 days. The crisis room beneath the assembly, the building was filled with reports from across the galaxy, and every single one brought worse news. The holographic displays showed economic data that made her want to hide under her desk. The Velkari luxury goods industry had collapsed completely. Their famous crystal sculptures and silk fabrics were created using human manufacturing techniques that the Valkyrie had never bothered to learn themselves. Without human workers, their factories sat empty and their trade routes were worthless. Human doctors had been running their major hospitals for decades. The Corvani had excellent theoretical knowledge, but lacked the intuitive understanding of anatomy that made human physicians so effective. Patients were dying because alien doctors could not make the quick decisions that human medical training emphasized. Even the peaceful Verdani were suffering. Their agricultural worlds had been designed by human engineers who understood how to balance different types of crops in ways that maximized yield while protecting the soil. Without humans to maintain these systems, the carefully planned farms were producing less food each month. We must convince them to return President Sujin announced to the emergency session of the Assembly Council. The same beings who had voted unanimously to demote humans just 2 months ago now sat in their chairs looking desperate and afraid. Offer them better terms, anything they want, she continued. Full voting rights, equal representation in all committees. Even a permanent seat on the Security Council. Just bring them back before the entire galactic economy collapses. The Valkyrie delegate, who had been so smug during the original vote, now looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 months. His purple skin had turned pale, and his forearms shook slightly as he spoke. The humans are not responding to our communications, he said. They return our messages with simple statements that they are busy with internal matters. When the diplomatic teams finally arrived at human worlds, they found something that none of them had expected. The humans were not angry anymore. They were not even sad. They were busy. Incredibly, impossibly busy in ways that made the alien observers feel dizzy just watching. Ambassador Kethfer of the Meridian Empire had been chosen to lead the diplomatic mission because his species had always maintained good relations with humanity. His ship approached the human colony world of New Sol, expecting to find a population in crisis, struggling to survive without assembly support. Instead, he found a world that had been completely transformed. The city that had been a modest collection of buildings just 2 months ago now stretched across an entire continent. Towers of metal and glass reached toward the sky like crystal trees. Parks filled with plants from dozens of different worlds created green spaces that were more beautiful than anything on the Assembly Capital world. But most shocking of all was the energy. They were not just rebuilding, they were creating something entirely new. Engineer Hasiok had been working 18 hours a day since the withdrawal began. His workshop was filled with designs for fusion reactors that could power entire star systems, without the need to get approval from assembly committees, who did not understand human engineering. He had made breakthroughs that would have taken years. Under the old system, the reactor core he was building used principles that combined human intuition with alien mathematics in ways that neither species could have achieved alone. But now that humans were free to experiment without political interference, the pace of innovation was incredible. Dr. Yoongi had similar experiences in her medical research laboratory. She had been working on a cure for the neural plague that affected several alien species. Under assembly rules, she would have needed to submit her research to 5 different committees and wait months for approval at each stage. Now, she was free to test her theories immediately. Her laboratory was filled with volunteers from the alien populations who had chosen to remain in human space. They trusted human medical ethics more than assembly bureaucracy and were eager to help find cures for diseases that had plagued their species for generations. The results were remarkable. In just 2 months, Dr. Yoongi had developed treatments for 3 different conditions that assembly medical teams had been struggling with for decades. Her secret was simple. She treated each patient as an individual rather than as a representative of their species. Ambassador Kethfer requested a meeting with Governor Jae-won, who had been appointed to manage relations with the remaining alien populations in human space. The meeting took place in a conference room that overlooked the bustling city below. The Meridian diplomat had prepared a speech about the benefits of rejoining the Compass Assembly, but Governor Jae-won interrupted him before he could begin. "We are not interested in returning the human," said firmly, but without anger. "We have remembered what it is like to work for ourselves, to dream without asking permission from people who do not understand our goals. But surely you need the resources and support that only the Assembly can provide," Kethfer argued. "How can you survive alone in a hostile galaxy?" Governor Jae-won smiled, and gestured toward the window. The city below was filled with humans and aliens working together on projects that would have been impossible under assembly regulations. Construction? Crews were building homes for refugee families. Scientists were sharing research that crossed species boundaries. Artists were creating works that blended human emotion with alien aesthetics in ways that made observers weep with joy. "We are not alone," the governor said. "We have friends who chose to stay with us because they believe in what we are building here. They are not subjects or servants. They are partners in creating something better than what existed before." The reports from human space grew more incredible with each passing day. They were building ships that used design principles no other species had ever imagined. Their colonies were expanding at rates that seemed impossible without the massive infrastructure that assembly membership provided. Most shocking of all, they were doing it without exploiting anyone. The alien residents of human worlds were not just allowed to stay, they were thriving in ways they had never experienced under the Plus Assembly's rigid caste system. Captain Sung-min had been put in charge of the new shipyard orbiting New Busan. His construction crews included humans, Kethrans, Meridians, and even a few Corvani who had decided to leave their homeworlds. Rather than work under the assembly system, the ships they were building looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They combined human engineering with alien artistic sensibilities, creating vessels that were both functional and beautiful. The Kethran workers contributed their understanding of quantum mechanics, while the Meridians added their knowledge of energy manipulation. But it was the human approach to leadership that made the project successful. Instead of rigid hierarchies and species-based job assignments, Captain Sung-min organized his workers based on their individual skills and interests. A young Kethran, who had never been allowed to work on weapon systems under assembly rules, became his best defensive systems engineer. Dr. Hyane was leading a research team that included representatives from 6 different species. They were working on terraforming technology that could transform dead worlds into garden planets. Under assembly rules, such research would have been restricted to senior scientists from core worlds only. The breakthrough came when the team realized that each species had unique perspectives on what made a world livable. Humans wanted flowing water and green plants. Kethrans needed areas with high electromagnetic fields. Meridians required spaces for energy meditation. Corvani needed atmospheric pressure that allowed their light patterns to be visible. Instead of trying to force one species' vision onto every world, they developed technology that could create multiple environment zones on a single planet. The result was worlds that could support diverse populations in ways that were both practical and beautiful. Ambassador Keffer spent 3 days touring human facilities and meeting with the mixed species teams that were accomplishing things the assembly had declared impossible. When he returned to his ship, he found his own crew asking questions about whether they could apply for immigration to human space. The pilot, who had served the Meridian diplomatic service for 20 years, wanted to work with human engineers on their new ship designs. The communications officer was fascinated by the way humans had integrated different species' languages into their computer systems. Even the security chief was impressed by the way humans had eliminated crime, not through harsh punishment, but by ensuring everyone had meaningful work and a voice in community decisions. The final report that Ambassador Kethfer sent back to the assembly was simple but devastating. The humans were not just surviving without assembly support, they were building something better than what the assembly had ever achieved. They had learned to bring out the best in every species they worked with, while the assembly had spent centuries trying to suppress those same qualities. The galaxy was changing, and the assembly was being left behind by beings they had dismissed as useful pets who needed proper guidance. Captain Tae-hyan was sitting in his command chair when the message arrived. The bridge of the human patrol ship Daejin was quiet, except for the soft hum of the engines and the occasional beep from the sensor stations. They had been hunting pirates in the Outer Rim for 6 months, and his crew had become like family. The communication officer, a young woman named Yuna, looked up from her station with confusion on her face. "Captain, we are receiving a priority message from Earth Command." "It's marked as Alpha Priority, sir." Alpha Priority meant the highest level of importance. Wars started with Alpha Priority messages. Tae-hyan felt his stomach tighten as he accepted the transmission. The holographic display showed Admiral Kung-Su himself, speaking directly from Earth. "All human vessels are ordered to return to Earth-controlled space. Immediately, the admiral said, without any greeting or explanation, "The United Earth government has withdrawn from the Galactic Assembly. You have 1 standard year to complete your current missions and return home. This order applies to all military vessels, civilian ships, research stations, mining operations, and diplomatic posts." The message ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in shocked silence. Taehyun stared at the empty holographic display, trying to process what he had just heard. Withdrawn from the assembly meant humanity was completely alone among the stars. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Subin, was the first to speak. "What does this mean for us, Captain?" she asked. Subin was one of the smartest tactical officers Taehyun had ever worked with. She had graduated at the top of her class from the Naval Academy on Mars and could calculate battle scenarios faster than most computers, but even she looked lost. "Right now, it means we are going home," Taehyun replied, but his heart felt heavy as he said the words. Going home meant leaving behind the alien crew members who had served with them for years. It meant abandoning the friends they had made on distant worlds. It meant turning their backs on beings who had trusted them with their lives. The Kethran engineer Veltok had saved their ship dozens of times with his incredible understanding of quantum mechanics. The Zephyrian medic, Dr. Zixera, had patched up human and alien crew members alike without ever asking questions about species or politics. The young Meridian communication specialist Softwind had learned to speak perfect Korean just to make the human crew feel more comfortable. Now they would all have to say goodbye. All across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Admiral Kung-Soo himself was coordinating the largest military withdrawal in galactic history from his flagship, the Soul's Pride. Thousands of human ships began changing course. Massive dreadnoughts that had patrolled the core worlds for decades turned toward Earth. Tiny courier vessels that carried messages between distant colonies started their long journey home. The sight was both magnificent and terrifying. Human warships moved in perfect formation through hyperspace, creating light shows that could be seen from planets light years away. But each ship that left meant one less human presence in the galaxy, one less bridge between species, one less voice calling for peace and cooperation. On the research station orbiting Kepler Prime, Dr. Minho was packing up 30 years of his life's work. The joint Human-Corvani Genetics Laboratory had been his dream project. Together with his Corvani partner Fluxwave, they had discovered cures for diseases that had plagued both species for centuries. The Corvani scientist floated beside him in its environmental suit. Its light patterns were dim and slow, which meant deep sadness in Corvani body language. "Why must you leave it?" asked through the translation device. "Our work is not finished. We are so close to solving the neural plague that affects your outer colonies." Minho looked at the research samples they had been working on. Each one represented months of careful experimentation. The breakthrough they needed might be just days away, but the orders were clear. All humans were to return to Earth space within 1 year. "I have no choice," my friend Minho said, as he sealed another container of research materials. "The decision has been made at the highest levels. But perhaps we can continue working together. Somehow, maybe through long-range communications or data exchanges." The Corvani's light patterns flickered with what humans had learned to recognize as hope mixed with doubt. "The Assembly will not allow such cooperation once you are gone. They fear human influence too much." Dr. Minho knew his friend was probably right. The same fear and jealousy that had driven humanity from the Assembly would make future cooperation almost impossible. Decades of scientific progress would slow to a crawl without human innovation and persistence. The economic shockwaves had already begun. The Galactic Stock Exchange crashed within hours of the withdrawal announcement. Investors suddenly realized how much of the galactic economy depended on human labor and ingenuity. Human-run factories across the galaxy began shutting down. The workers were given generous severance packages, but that did not help the alien consumers who depended on human-manufactured goods. Human medicine was considered the best in the galaxy. Human entertainment was enjoyed by billions of beings. Human food had become popular even among species that could barely digest it. But the real shock came when alien managers tried to take over human facilities and found they could not operate them. Human technology was not just advanced, it was intuitive. It was designed to work with human psychology and human instincts and human ways of thinking. The manufacturing plant on Rigel 7 that produced medical scanners employed 3,000 humans and 10,000 aliens. The human supervisors had trained their alien colleagues for years, but when the humans left the production line ground to a halt within days, the aliens knew how to operate individual machines, but they did not understand how all the systems worked together. Human engineers had designed the factory to flow like a living organism, with each section supporting the others in ways that seemed obvious to humans, but were mysterious to alien minds. Governor Li Suyang of the mining colony on asteroid belt Omega received daily reports of similar problems. The automated mining systems required constant small adjustments that human operators made instinctively. The alien workers who tried to replace them either broke the equipment or produced inferior results. It was becoming clear that humans were not just workers in the galactic economy. They were the glue that held much of it together. Their natural ability to understand complex systems and adapt quickly to changing conditions had made them invaluable in ways the Assembly had never realized. Captain Namjoon commanded a transport ship carrying civilian families back to Earth space. His passengers included doctors, teachers, engineers, artists, and farmers who had made homes on dozens of different worlds. Many had been born on alien planets and had never seen Earth. The children especially were confused and frightened. 8-year-old Boyarum had grown up on the water world Oceania, playing with young Aquarians in the shallow seas. 10-year-old Gunwoo had learned to fly gliders in the low gravity of Lithia alongside young rock people who taught him their stone songs. Now, they were all leaving the only homes they had ever known because adults they had never met had decided humans were too dangerous to live freely among the stars. The transport ship's common area was filled with quiet conversations in dozens of languages. Humans saying goodbye to alien friends who had become family. HA sat with her Meridian research partner, Brightsong. They had been working together for 15 years studying stellar formation in nebula clouds. Their mixed species team had discovered 12 new star systems and 3 potentially habitable worlds. "We'll miss our conversations about quantum dynamics," Bright said in her musical voice. "Humans think about physics in ways that help me understand concepts my own people struggle with, and I will miss your ability to see patterns in cosmic radiation that human instruments cannot detect," Dr. HR replied. Together, we were discovering things neither of our species could learn alone. As the transport ship jumped to hyperspace, Dr. H looked back at the receding star systems through the observation deck windows. Each point of light represented a world where humans had lived and worked and built relationships with alien neighbors. Now those lights were fading behind them as humanity gathered itself for an unknown future. The galaxy was about to learn what it had lost, and humans were about to remember what they could accomplish when they worked for themselves instead of trying to please others who would never truly accept them. The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly stretched as far as the eye could see. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in their assigned seats. The air buzzed with the sound of hundreds of different languages being translated through tiny devices in each delegate's ear. Blue lights danced on the walls, showing the voting results in real time. "Ambassador?" His knuckles had turned white from gripping so hard. Behind him sat 12 other human representatives, including his wife, Hyjin, who had been warning him for months that this day would come. The vote had just finished. The results glowed on the massive screen above the speaker's platform. Every single species in the assembly had voted yes, except for one. Earth had cast the only no vote. The decision was final. Humans would no longer be allowed to handle important diplomatic missions, or lead military operations, or manage trade negotiations. Instead, they would be given simple jobs: mining asteroids, building roads on frontier planets, cleaning waste, processing plants, manual labor that required strong backs and simple minds, according to the assembly records. The Valkyrie representative stood up from his seat. He was tall and thin, with purple skin that seemed to shimmer under the hall lights. His 4 arms moved gracefully as he spoke. A translator device made his words sound cold and mechanical in human ears. "The humans have served their purpose," the Valkyrie said, with what humans could only describe as a smile. "But they are too emotional, too unpredictable for complex work. They form attachments with everyone, even their enemies. This makes them weak. They cannot make hard decisions when feelings get in the way." Many other delegates nodded their agreement. The insect-like Zephyrians clicked their mandibles in approval. The gas-breathing Corvani flashed their light organs in patterns that meant yes, yes, yes in their language. Even the peaceful plant people of Verdania swayed their branches in the gesture that meant they agreed. They had sent their children to fight in wars, to protect species they had never even met before. They had given food, medicine, and aid to any world that asked for help. Human doctors had saved billions of alien lives. Human engineers had built the great space stations that connected distant worlds. Human diplomats had prevented dozens of wars through patient negotiation and careful compromise. Human soldiers had died on 1,000 battlefields defending beings who looked nothing like them. But none of that mattered now. The assembly had made its decision. Humans were useful pets who needed proper guidance. Nothing more. Dongwu felt his wife place her hand on his shoulder. Haijin had been an ambassador longer than he had. She understood alien cultures better than almost any human alive. She spoke 17 different galactic languages fluently. She had personally negotiated the peace treaty that ended the Zephyrian Civil War. None of that mattered either. "I told you this would happen," she whispered in his ear. "They have always feared us. Not because we are strong, but because we are different. We make friends too easily, we trust too quickly, we forgive too often. This scares them more than any weapon we could build." The Corvani delegate was speaking now. The translator made its words sound like music, but the meaning was harsh. Humans are children playing with adult responsibilities. They need supervision for their own good and for the safety of the galaxy. More agreements came from around the hall. The rock people of Lithia ground their stone hands together in approval. The energy beings of the Nexus Collective pulsed brighter in their containment fields. The water dwellers of Oceania made complex patterns with their tentacles that meant strong agreement. Only a few delegates remained silent. The Merivian Empire representatives looked uncomfortable in their seats. A few of the smaller species seemed to be avoiding eye contact with the human table, but none of them spoke up. None of them defended the humans who had helped them countless times before. Dongwu stood up slowly. The great hall gradually became quiet as beings noticed the human ambassador rising to his feet. His movements were calm and controlled, but every human in the room could see the anger burning in his eyes. "My fellow beings," he said, and his voice carried clearly across the vast chamber without any need for amplification. Humans had always been good at making themselves heard when it mattered. Humanity has served this assembly faithfully for 3 centuries. We have bled for you. We have died for you. We have shared everything we had with you. Our technology, our culture, our knowledge, our very lives have been offered freely to any who needed them." He paused and looked around the hall. Thousands of alien eyes stared back at him. Some looked ashamed. Others looked defiant. The Velko delegate still wore that expression that looked like smugness to human eyes. "We have fought your wars when you asked us to. We have built your cities when you needed help. We have healed your sick when your own doctors could not. We have fed your hungry when your crops failed. We have protected your children when danger threatened them." His voice grew stronger with each word. Other human delegates were standing now too. Haijin rose beside her husband. Colonel Minho, the military attaché, stood at attention. Dr. Sunya, the chief science advisor, pushed back her chair and got to her feet. "We did all of this not because we had to, but because we believed we were family. We thought that being part of this assembly meant we were all working together for something greater than ourselves. We thought we were building a future where every species could thrive and grow and reach their full potential." The hall was completely silent now. Even the constant hum of the translation devices seemed quieter than usual. Alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some of the smaller species looked like they wanted to hide. "But today, you have shown us what you truly think of our kind. You see us not as partners, but as servants. Not as equals, but as pets. Not as family, but as useful tools to be put away. When the real work needs to be done," the Valkyrie delegates started to interrupt, but Dongwu raised his hand, and somehow the alien fell silent. There was something in the human ambassador's stance that demanded attention, something that made even the most arrogant beings in the hall listen. Therefore he continued, and now his voice rang like a bell through the great chamber, the United Earth. "Government formally withdraws from the Galactic Assembly, effective immediately. We will honor our existing contracts and treaties for exactly 1 standard year as required by assembly law. After that, humanity will chart its own course among the stars. The explosion of sound that followed was unlike anything ever heard in the assembly hall before delegates jumped to their feet. Some shouted in languages the translators could not keep up with. Others made gestures of shock or anger or disbelief that needed no translation. No species had ever voluntarily left the assembly. The economic implications were staggering. The military consequences were terrifying. The political ramifications would reshape the entire galaxy. But Dongwu and Haijin simply gathered their belongings with calm dignity. They moved like people who had made a difficult decision and were now at peace with it. As they walked toward the exit, the alien delegates began to realize what they had just lost: human industry, human innovation, human determination, human compassion. All of it walking away because they had been too afraid and too proud to treat their greatest allies with basic respect. The great doors of the assembly hall closed behind the human delegation with a sound like thunder. The aliens were left alone to contemplate what they had done and what it would cost them. Outside in the corridor, Haijin took her husband's hand. "Where do we go from here?" she asked quietly. Dongwu looked back at the closed doors one last time, then turned toward the future. "Home," he said simply. "We go home, and we remember what it means to be human."